Okay, welcome back. I hope that that last video was helpful. Let's go into module 4 and 5 here. We'll close up module 4. Module 3 was talking about how the big impact of ACEs, possibly over the lifespan. Children, you'll see them be hypervigilant, possibly hyper, possibly anxious, possibly, having some problems with conduct, attitude. Adults, you might see problems with trust in relationships, um, maybe residual guilt, just a lot of things. Like I mentioned, some adults, you might say, continually kind of live in drama, and a lot of times that's created in childhood. So again, we all exist on a continuum. Don't think that just because somebody's like at a 5 or 6, they don't have better resilience than somebody that maybe has 0. And some people are very healthy. Some people come through these things, and that's so. Why? How does that happen? How does it happen that somebody has 5 or 6, ACEs, and then lives a really healthy life and is productive and is happy? Well, I had you guys write about that, and the research, I left it kind of blank because I wanted to hear what you all thought. The research really, and this goes with the oxytocin research that's emerged in the recent years, where oxytocin is released when people bond together, and you see, you can go into these rodent studies and look at, physically, structurally, the brain is preserved when there's just these injections of oxytocin, even though the rat's been through horrible things, this isolation and these traumatic events. And you give them these doses of oxytocin, and magically there's not this overwhelming of cortisol, this neurotoxic, this neurally toxic state. And so, as I mentioned, they're experimenting with giving people nasal sprays that have PTSD of oxytocin. It's been in the past 5 years when this stuff has been coming out. So it's really exciting, and I think that it really gives more weight and credence to Ann Maston. She's been on this for quite a while. Her number one predictive factor for people that make it through, and I would say in my own clinical, working 16 years in clinical practice, the number one predictor is a really caring, consistent, stable caregiver. And having that one, even just one. If you have more than one, that's fantastic. If you have people outside the family, that's fantastic, that you can rely upon. But there has to be a stable adult. And I'm going to go back to that. I don't mean to thwart what people wrote this week, but I do feel very strongly, and I think the research bears this out, that's the main thing, is having somebody, a caregiver, especially in childhood, that is stable, consistent, nurturing, loving, that is always there. So I remember I had somebody ask me once, because we were kind of arguing over, okay, what technique is better than another, which is best. So they had me contemplate this now. Think about a time in your life, a really down, a low time, where you felt like everything was lost. You felt like everything, is not going to get better. And yet there was one person that was there. What did that person give to you at that time? What did that person do that made the difference? If you want to pause this and think about it, you're more than welcome to. But I've done this in classes, and invariably, and I've not heard this, it wasn't that somebody gave them like 5 directions of what to do then. It wasn't that somebody started barking orders, we just pull yourself up, or things, or just said, things will get better. It was, that person was there. That person listened to them. And that person cared about them. That they knew that they cared about them. And if you think about that, and this is a new connection for me right as I'm talking to you, because I've not made this, this oxytocin connection. But if you think about that, and that human bonding, and that intimate, I'm not saying sexual intimacy, I'm saying, relational intimacy, that eye-to-eye gaze, that sharing of emotion, that genuineness, that reciprocal emotion. That was it. That's what helped, that oxytocin, that release, that it's going to be okay. Somebody else cares. Somebody else is acknowledging my pain. Somebody's being genuine. And that's what we really try to, when we get to intensives, that's really what we try to impress. But that didn't come through Adam. That came from another person, this talk that I'm giving to you here. But that's oxytocin. That's healing. That's healing. There's got to be somebody caring. There's got to be. And so I asked, okay, what can you do as a therapist? Well, we'll get into that. We're going to get into, over our next few weeks, we're going to get into what you can do as a therapist. But what I want you to think about is, how could you advocate or be a force where, a just outcome happens for a child that's been through trauma. And a just outcome happens when a child has a stable, caring, nurturing, consistent, stable adult in their lives. So if that's you as a therapist, that's all you can do, and it's child welfare has custody, and that's it. Is there something bigger in the system that you could do? Can you advocate? Can you advocate for policies that, especially for early childhood? These things happen over, 18 years, even longer. Our brain develops longer than that. But, how can you advocate in society for kids, for caring, for early childhood interventions, for things that are going to put, we talked, several of you talked about, either mentoring or situations where other adults were in places where, there was support, but there's got to be a net, because the situations that turn out bad, the ones that, that really, the lives are cut short, people are going to prison, there's no net, there's nothing. People don't have, extended family, people don't have extended neighbors, people get caught in a system that doesn't care about them. And so that's how we instill resilience. That's the number one factor. As therapists, what we do, and you'll look at, all these different books I shared just a second ago. I'm a member of a few different groups related to trauma, but there's one common theme that comes back, and that's self-regulation. If you recall the kind of overarching, this is the impact of trauma, overactive fight versus flight. The overactive, thinking about the future, thinking about the past, this anxiety state. If we can teach clients that have been through this to self-regulate, we've done something good. And because that's also something we're going to need to do as therapists is, that self-recognition, that self-awareness. When do I need to take that breath and come back to the present? So we have the cure. We've seen, the neurological research. We've seen the science kind of overlap and dovetail that says, okay, here's the impact of trauma, and now here's what do we do to treat it. This is an exciting time. I mean, this is really exciting to be in psychology at this place, because we're seeing how much, that trauma affects us throughout our lives. But we're also, you're at the verge of going out and helping people, and you have this information that absolutely is validated, that helps, that works. And so that's what we're going to talk about throughout the rest of this course, is this validated information. How does it work? How does it help? And putting it into practice. So let's jump into number 5. Let's jump into, and in fact, I'll cut this off here. I don't mind just making short little clips, because I know you get interrupted. You don't, okay, where was I? I know our lives are hectic, and in summer, and we've got, for some of you, we have intensives comes up this week. Mine comes up the week afterwards. So let's cut this a little short. I'll jump into 5 and 6 after this.